Christopher Skeete is the parliamentary assistant to the Premier for relations with English-speaking Quebecers, also the CAQ M&A for Sainte-Rose, and he joins me this morning. Good morning.
Good morning, Elias.
So first things first, you passed Bill 9 at 4 o'clock in the morning. You passed Bill 21, 10:30 at night. You invoked closure on both of these bills. How do you defend the way that these bills were passed? The critics say that something of this importance needed to play out in the traditional way and not have closure invoked. What do you say to those critics?
Let me give you an example about the immigration bill, right? When we created the bill, when Kathleen Vale rewrote the previous immigration law, it took 23 hours of parliamentary commissions of people working together, working to draft that legislation. At 60 hours, we had only gotten to the sixth paragraph of this law. So, closure is never an ideal situation, but when you're faced with really systematic filibustering, we just didn't have a choice, Elias.
I certainly think you had a choice, but you chose to invoke closure. Many people would say that if you're going to do that, there has to be something imminent, a threat that's imminent, a reason for this measure of emergency, and I don't think that exists here, right? So why not play it through? Why not go through everything to ensure that people cannot use this as a reason to say, okay, you see, this bill is not valid. Like, it's an excuse for people to say that this bill is not valid if you do these kinds of measures. No? Let
me just give you an example. About a week before we had our last commission meeting, there was a whole federation of employers, le patronat, everybody in Quebec Inc. was saying, please pass this law. They were begging us. They're saying that this law will address a lot of problems that we have in terms of the labor shortage that we're experiencing in Quebec. So I disagree. We actually had to get this done quickly in order to address the labor shortage that we're living through in Quebec. This immigration law will allow us to better select people who can directly respond to this labor shortage. So no, it was needed, and we had to act. And this filibustering was actually bad for the economy. We had to act.
Okay, so maybe you can use that for Bill 9, but on Bill 21, you added you made many amendments that the opposition didn't have time to adjust or react to, including adding these surveillance and disciplinary mechanisms. So. It was done clearly, I think, to catch the opposition off guard. That's going to cause more debate. So why did that have to be done in the case of Bill 21?
Well, the Liberal Party can't have it both ways. They can't tell us on one side that we're not listening to their suggestions, and that's why they're filibustering the law, and then we actually amend the law to cater to some of their suggestions. Call us disingenuous.
So are you saying these surveillance and disciplinary mechanisms were put in to appease the Liberals?
They kept saying that it was not applicable and that it lacked definition. So what we did is we defined it, and that's something that we had to do in order to make sure that it was applicable. So let's use the example of the surveillance, right? Because that makes it sound rather ominous. It's really not. The idea is that in every government department, there's what's called a répondant, a person who is ultimately accountable for making sure that a law is being followed, right? So what we're saying is the minister is allowed to designate a répondant to make sure that the law is being followed. This is all it is. Now, the Liberal Party would have you think rather suspiciously that we're going to be having some kind of police force. This is ridiculous, obviously.
So then how will you enforce it then? It's not a police force, but it's got to be some sort of inspector. And then at the end of the day, if you find someone who's not in compliance, how do you deal with them?
And that was another part of the amendment, right? So now there's a person who's charged with being a répondant to respond in case that there's a problem with enforcement of the law. Now, what's the enforcement? What are we talking about, right? Again, not a legal criminal thing. What we're talking about here is adjusting it to the law on employment, which says that a person would be subject to disciplinary measures. It would be like when I was a customs officer, Elias, and the employer said, your beard has to be shaved and you have to have your hair properly cut before you come to work. Well, what if I don't? Well, the idea is I'd be subject to disciplinary measures with my employer. Mm-hmm. Those are the adjustments that we did in the law.
What do you think this is going to mean for your government's legacy?
I think people are going to be ultimately very happy that we did this. I think, we have to look at it from the wider historical context, Elias. This is something we've been talking about for 11 years in Quebec. People were being denied service on their bus because people thought that the law should apply to buses. What we've done is we've clarified at which point secularization of the state needs to apply. Everything else is good to go.
So you wait, but to use that bus example,
yeah.
So this is clarified now? It doesn't apply to buses?
Absolutely not. A person wearing a niqab would be allowed to enter a bus today, and if they're paying for their service as an adult, they would be allowed on board. What the law does say is if you want to have like the elderly rebate or the student rebate, the driver may ask you to show your face only for identification. But after that, you're allowed to wear whatever you want. So a person can do what they want in this society. What we're saying is select individuals who will use force of the government, police officers, judges, corrections officers, those persons, we're asking that they leave the religion at the door.
Don't you think these last-minute amendments that your government made deserved to be debated, deserved more time to be looked at?
But they were. In those 120 hours between the Bill 9 and Bill 21, the Liberal Party actually raised all these points. So our amendments went to confirm that those points were well taken, and we've added those mechanisms in the law. So no, I would say that the parliamentary process served its purpose.
And with regards to that parliamentary process and Bill 21, you think that in the case of Bill 21, we were at a point and we're at a state in Quebec where we needed to, the government needed to invoke closure on Bill 21 as well?
Yeah. Nature abhors a void. And for 11 years, we've been living in this, what does it mean to be secular void? And I think the failure to act has actually increased extremism. What we've done is we've clarified exactly where the line is, and now we can all move on. And I think that's what's been missing in this debate, Elias. For 11 years, we've been turning in circles, various electoral issues. Every time we go to an election, it's always on the ballot. We need to move on from this. I think Quebecers want us to move on from this. So this is not sudden. This is something we've been transparent about since 2014, and this is something that we delivered on. And now I'm eager to talk about other things, namely the economy, healthcare, education. That's what I want to talk about.
Speaking with Christopher Skeete about Bill 9 and Bill 21. Christopher, both these bills, many people say at the end of the day, the result will be a Quebec that is more white and more francophone. You're an Anglophone. You're a visible minority. How are you on board with these bills?
This is about making sure that everybody is equal. And in this case, a person who is who uses the force of the state, a police officer, that person has to represent the neutral nature of the state. And neutrality is an important word when dealing with justice. Neutrality is an important term when we need to feel that the state is being fair, because the state has awesome, enormous power. So I think this is something that all democracies need to look at, because secularization is what makes us all equal citizens. And I think in select areas, like persons in authority, it's a normal process. If you work as a librarian for the state, if you work at the SAAQ, I don't have a problem with a person because they're not exercising force. They're not using the coercive power of the state in their work. So this is, I think, something that all societies are looking at. We're not the only Western democracy looking at this. A lot of people in the West are asking themselves how to better integrate these various religions that we see around the world, and with immigration and the movement of people. And I think we're no different.
One last question for you, Chris. Are you prepared for, the negative headlines that are come with this, and are you prepared for the chaos, court-wise, legal challenges over the next few years?
I think that this is a step forward. I think ultimately we've put the situation to rest. And anytime someone says, well, what about this? We can say, no, we've acted. This is where the line is, and we have clarity now. And I think that ultimately is better than where we were.
Christopher Skeete is the M&A for Sainte-Rose and the parliamentary assistant to the Premier for relations with English-speaking Quebecers. Thanks for taking the time this morning.
Thank you, Elias.